Hello there, lovely people. It's Alex from Nintendo Life here, and if you're watching this video, then I am sorry, because it means that you've most likely been affected by Pro Controller drift. In this video, we're going to take you through a number of different processes that you can take yourself at home with only a few limited supplies, and hopefully try and get that thing humming again. These are methods that I've actually used myself and fixed my drifting Pro Controller. Unfortunately, as a result, that means that all the Pro Controllers featured in this video actually work, so do bear that in mind. But anyway, that's more than enough waffling. Let's dive right into things. If your in-game character is moving when you're not touching the left stick, or if your aiming is slow or limited in one or more directions, you could well be suffering from something called stick drift, or just drifting as we'll be calling it in this video. This is basically when something's gone coco in your controller's analog stick, and it's not functioning like the reliable potentiometer that it should be. Drifting is a problem that is undeniably common in the Switch's Joy-Con, but it can also affect Pro Controllers as well. Although that's not to say that Nintendo's products are cheap or shoddy universally. Drift is an issue that can affect any controller on the market. Even the mighty Xbox One Elite controller isn't safe from this problem. We already have a guide up on how to fix drifting Joy-Con if you need it, but the same rules don't completely apply when talking about the Pro Controller. And although the steps detailed in this video are simple and not tremendously challenging by any stretch of the imagination, we do have to state that you follow this guide at your own risk, and we cannot take responsibility for any whoopsies that may occur. But that's enough of that. Let's try the first method, shall we? First things first, and we know this may well seem obvious to some, but something's only obvious if you know what it is. We're going to take you to the Switch's settings menu and recalibrate the offending stick. It's usually the left stick, but hey, we're not here to judge. Go to the home menu, navigate down to system settings, scroll all the way down to the bottom on the left side of the screen, and select controllers and sensors. Scroll down on the right hand part of the screen and select calibrate control sticks, because we're planning to do just that. If you're running on the latest version of the OS, a little pop-up menu will let you know that any button mapping changes you may have made will be temporarily disabled. Just select OK, it's fine. You'll then need to click in the stick that's been drifting. You'll then be presented with a screen that shows how the console interprets the stick movement, as you can plainly see right now. Rotate the stick on its axis, flick it around, generally get a feel for how it's behaving. Also, be sure to just leave it alone for a little bit. If the crosshair moves without you doing anything, however little, or if you're unable to make a clean, smooth 360-degree rotation, or if it doesn't even want to move all the way to the edge in some areas, then I'm sorry to say, but you've got a problem. But at the very least, you're watching a video that will hopefully fix that sucker right back up for you. Press the X button to enter calibration and follow the on-screen instructions as best as you can. Once that's complete, run through the same tests we mentioned earlier, like flicking the stick and rotating it. If the issue no longer presents itself, then you are one of the mega lucky ones, and you don't need to do anything more. Just keep an eye on how it performs when you're playing, and if it starts to act up again, maybe come back to this video. In all likelihood, however, you're still going to be seeing some problems. And so we're all going to need to get a little bit more technical, but don't worry, thankfully not that technical at all. If you're still stuck in a drifting pickle, you'll need to get a few supplies, namely a small Phillips head screwdriver, ideally with quite a long neck, simply because some of the screws are quite deep. I don't actually have one, but I do have a flathead that will work in this situation as well, because it's me. You will also need some compressed air, which usually comes in a can, and a can of contact cleaner. I said contact cleaner. Now we're going to need to disassemble the Pro Controller to a degree in order to effectively clean it, as unlike Joy-Con, there's no rubber skirt you can pull up to access the stick's internals. I'm going to pass you over to me on a slightly different microphone, who's going to take you through the disassembly process. Thanks, past Alex. Yes, here I am, and we're going to take this sucker apart. Thankfully, it's a fairly straightforward process, but even so, it's one of those things where we really think it's better to just see it live, you know, that sort of thing? Easy peasy. So I've got my screwdrivers. This is a flathead, but it's the long one, as I mentioned, because I can't reach in otherwise. I've done this before plenty of times, and so let's just get into it. First of all, you've got two screws here, one here and one here, and they just come off. It's just standard small Phillips head. Quick tip, get somewhere to put your little screws and make a note of which ones are which. These two little things, seriously, you do not want to lose any of these screws. Once these two screws have been removed, it's just now a simple case of sliding these covers off, the handles, and just placing them to one side. Don't worry about mixing up left and right because they will only go on one way. Easy. Now your controller looks a little bit more... Stop it. Now your controller looks a little bit more naked, but there is still a fair amount we have yet to do. Unfortunately, if you want to turn this over to the back, you'll start to see some more screw holes. One here, well, they're not screw holes, they're screws. One here, and two on the other side in exactly the same place, but on the mirror side. Just remove them, simple pimple. Now that those 4 screws have been removed, you should be able to pull this back part off here. And it just comes back off like that. Oh, as simple as that. Now, as you can see, this is actually translucent. Not everyone knows that, but hey, now you know. You've now got this battery that you need to remove, and it's just a simple case of getting a fingernail underneath and lifting it out like that. It is super, super easy. Don't lose it. It's bigger than a screw though, so it doesn't need a pot. We've now got another 5 screws to contend with. There is one here, one here, one here, and there is one here and one here, and these are the 2 that we're going to need the long-necked screwdriver for. This is a flathead. It will do in a pinch, but realistically you should be using a Phillips. Remember, of course, to be careful with the controls on the front. There's no power in the controller anymore, so it's not going to power on. But even so, just be wary. You don't want to damage it, do you? Now that those are out, it's now just a simple case of basically pulling these 2 parts apart. Now, you may feel some resistance, but be careful naturally, but don't be too shy about it. You may need to provide some additional leverage down here, and you should see that comes apart quite nicely. And that ribbon cable wasn't on my original one. Or maybe it was. Either way, some of the caps may come off. That's a very easy fix. You literally just stick them back on top. You may need to rotate them and stuff like that. So that is your Pro Controller open. Actually, you know, that's a good idea. You might as well remove these, because they're not going to do any use being there, are they? You can, if you like, detach this cable here, which I'm going to do. Just be wary that it is a very delicate cable, and make sure you put it back exactly how it was, or you're going to have a bad time. Ribbon cables can be temperamental little sausages. You can leave it on if you prefer, but, you know, you might actually end up doing less damage by taking it off. Back to you, Scripted Alex. Now that it's open, you'll be able to access the problem stick's internal gubbins and have a proper look at what's going on. In all likelihood, you're going to be seeing dust, debris, hair, the usual suspects for why Precise Electronics aren't cutting the proverbial mustard. Grab your handy-dandy can of compressed air and blast these intrusive bits of rubbish out of your precious equipment. Make sure you follow the instructions on the can of compressed air that you have, however, as some contain a liquid that may potentially damage your controller. Follow the instructions, which will likely say something along the lines of keeping it level, and don't go being a silly sausage now, you hear? Once you've got out as much as you can, it's time to whack out that contact cleaner. Spray the area underneath the plastic stick cap generously but carefully. You want to coat it but not drown it. Give the stick a generous wiggle to make sure the cleaner gets in and around everywhere it needs to, and don't be afraid if it feels like the stick is catching in places. That's just because the faceplate on the controller stops it usually from moving this far, and it's just kind of catching on the bit of the shell of the potentiometer. Wait for a few minutes and then repeat the process, and feel free to apply and rotate the stick at the same time if you like, as long as you don't put too much on, as we said before. You can then wait and do the process a 3rd time if you like, but it likely isn't necessary. Once you've applied the final dousing of cleaning, wait a good 10 minutes with the controller in a well-ventilated area to make sure that it's all lovely and dry in there before putting it back together. Now put it back together. Return to the stick calibration screen that we mentioned before and test out your newly cleaned stick. It's still not working perfectly? Well, don't worry, a quick recalibration just like before should solve any woes that may befall you. Because we calibrated it before when it was dodgy and that didn't fix it, that meant that there was an internal problem and it needs to be recalibrated again to bring it back to normal spec. Perfectly normal, don't start worrying. Once that's completed, you should now have a fully working Pro Controller again. Unless there was something else wrong with it, like the A button had melted. Hooray! If it's not still working, however, you might might be tempted to try a few things, so let's cover those very briefly. Whilst it is indeed possible to replace the analog sticks in a Pro Controller, we're really not happy to recommend that. The sticks are soldered in place, which may seem trivial to some, and if that's you, then, you know, you can make your best judgment, but there's too much that can go wrong with a soldering iron for us to feel properly comfortable taking you through that, nor the process of ordering replacement sticks. Instead, your best course of action is either to just out and out buy a replacement, which is far from ideal, we know, or get in contact with Nintendo directly and discuss repairing the controller with them. It's possible that you may be charged for a repair depending on various circumstances, so be prepared to cough up a little bit to get back on the Pro Controller train. And there you have it. Hopefully that was at least useful, or maybe just insightful if you didn't actually have any issues, and if that's the case, yes, I'm happy. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, then why don't you wiggle that subscribe button back and forth just to make sure it's all good and clean in there, and be sure to check out nintendolife.com for all sorts of lovely Nintendo-related content. Thank you again for watching. Bye-bye.